I stood before the floor-to-length mirror in the bridal suite, my fingers trembling as they traced the delicate lace of my gown. It felt surreal, like a dream I had been nurturing since childhood was finally breaking the surface of reality. I was about to marry Marcus, the man who had been my anchor, my confidant, and the architect of my future for the last 4 years. Every detail of this day had been curated with love. The ivory roses, the string quartet, the vows we had written together over glasses of wine in our small apartment. My reflection stared back at me, beaming. Behind me, Sophie, my maid of honor and best friend since our college days, adjusted my veil. "You look breathtaking," she whispered, her eyes meeting mine in the glass. Sophie was more than a friend. She was the sister I never had. We had survived heartbreak, exams, and the chaos of our 20s together. There was no one else I would have wanted by my side as I transitioned into this new chapter of life. We had chosen a breathtaking estate in upstate New York for the ceremony. It sat on the edge of a pristine lake, surrounded by forests that were just beginning to turn the fiery hues of autumn. The air was crisp, smelling of pine and impending rain. But inside the manor, everything was warm and golden. My mother was weeping softly in the corner, clutching a handkerchief, overwhelmed by the sight of her daughter in white. I remember feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Life felt complete. I had found a partner who understood my silence as well as my words, and I was surrounded by a circle of people who championed our love. The morning had passed in a blur of champagne toasts, hairspray, and laughter. Sophie had been attentive to a fault, ensuring my glass was full and my nerves were calmed. She seemed genuinely happy, her smile mirroring my own, her hand steady as she fastened the pearl buttons on my back. Everything was perfect. The timeline was running smoothly, the guests were arriving, and the man of my dreams was waiting at the end of the aisle. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of fresh lilies, and told myself to memorize this feeling. The pure, unadulterated joy of a promise about to be kept. I felt safe. I felt loved. But beneath the surface of this perfect day, a darkness was gathering that would consume everything I held dear. The garden was a masterpiece of nature's artistry. Golden leaves drifted slowly from the ancient oaks, carpeting the aisle in a mosaic of amber and crimson. As the first notes of the cello drifted through the cool air, my father offered me his arm. His eyes were shining, a silent communication of pride and letting go. "Ready?" he asked softly. "Ready?" I breathed, though my heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Walking down that aisle felt like floating. Faces of friends and family blurred into a sea of smiles, but my focus was singular. Marcus stood beneath the floral arch, looking devastatingly handsome in his charcoal suit. When our eyes locked, I saw the emotion I had prayed for. A glistening sheen of tears, a smile that seemed to say, "Finally." I gripped my bouquet tighter, anchoring myself to the earth, convinced that this was the pinnacle of my existence. The ceremony was intimate and profound. We exchanged vows that promised patience, kindness, and endurance. I pledged my loyalty to him. He pledged his heart to me. When he slid the ring onto my finger, a cool band of gold, I felt a physical sense of locking into place. We were no longer two separate entities, we were a unit. The kiss that sealed our union was met with applause that sounded like rolling thunder, a celebration of what we all believed was true love. The reception that followed was magical. We dined under a canopy of twinkling fairy lights in a clear top tent, the night sky visible above us. A jazz band played soft, soulful tunes that mingled with the laughter of our guests. We ate, we drank, we danced. My father gave a toast that left half the room in tears, speaking of how he had watched Marcus grow from a boy into the man worthy of his daughter. Yet amidst the joy there were flickerings of shadow. Marcus seemed distracted. During dinner, I caught him staring off toward the lake, his expression unreadable. When I squeezed his hand, he would smile. But the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. It was a practiced curve of the lips, lacking the warmth I was used to. I brushed it off as exhaustion. Planning a wedding was draining, and the emotional weight of the day was heavy. I told myself I was overanalyzing, that I should just bask in the glow of being Mrs. Sterling. As midnight approached, I had no idea that the real nightmare was just beginning. The party wound down in the early hours of the morning. We said our goodbyes, the adrenaline finally giving way to a bone-deep weariness. We retreated to the honeymoon suite, a luxurious room in the east wing of the manor, decorated with flickering pillar candles and petals scattered across the duvet. It was the setting for a romantic climax to the day, intimate and secluded. I felt a shy anticipation as I closed the heavy oak door behind us. I turned to Marcus, expecting him to pull me into his arms, to finally exhale the day's stress together. Instead, he walked past me, loosening his tie with a sharp, almost aggressive motion. He didn't look at me. "I'm exhausted," he muttered, tossing his jacket onto a chair. The tone wasn't just tired, it was cold, detached. I froze, my hands hovering near the zipper of my dress. "Marcus? Is everything okay?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair, his back turned to me. "It's been a long day. I need some space. My head is pounding." Without another word, he grabbed a pillow from the bed and walked over to the velvet chaise lounge by the window. "I'm going to sleep here. I don't want to keep you up with my tossing and turning." I stood there, stunned. It was our wedding night. The rejection stung sharper than a slap. I wanted to argue, to cry, to demand an explanation, but the absolute finality in his posture stopped me. He curled up on the couch, turning his face away from the room, effectively shutting me out. I undressed alone in the bathroom, washing off the makeup of a happy bride to reveal the confused woman beneath. I climbed into the massive bed, feeling incredibly small. The silence in the room was suffocating. I lay awake for hours, staring at the shadows dancing on the ceiling, trying to rationalize his behavior. Nerves, I told myself. Just nerves. I must have drifted into a fitful sleep eventually, because I woke with a start. The room was pitch black. The luminous dial of the clock read 2:13 a.m. A sound had pulled me from my dreams, a soft click of the door latch. I sat up, blinking into the darkness. The chaise lounge by the window was empty. Marcus was gone. My heart pounding, I followed the sounds down the hallway, toward Sophie's room. The hallway of the estate was dimly lit by sconces that cast long, eerie shadows against the damask wallpaper. The floorboards were old, and I stepped carefully, terrified that a creak would announce my presence. Why was I terrified? This was my husband. I should have been calling out his name, worried he was sick. But my gut, that primal instinct that lies dormant until survival is at stake, told me to be silent. I heard a low murmur. It wasn't coming from the bathroom or the staircase. It was coming from the guest suite at the end of the hall, the suite assigned to the maid of honor. To Sophie. I stopped outside the door. My hands were shaking so violently I had to clasp them against my chest. Through the heavy wood, the sounds were unmistakable. It wasn't conversation. It was the soft, stifled sounds of intimacy. A rustle of sheets. A low groan. And then a giggle, hushed, breathless, and familiar. "Sophie." My world tilted on its axis. I felt bile rise in my throat. No, my mind screamed. Asterisk, not this. Anything but this. Asterisk, but then I heard him. "Marcus." His voice was a low rumble, whispering words I couldn't distinguish, but the tone was intimate, possessing. It was the voice of a lover. I stood frozen in the corridor, a ghost in my own life. Time seemed to warp, stretching seconds into hours. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The man who had pledged his eternal fidelity to me 6 hours ago was in that room, betraying me with the woman who had held my bouquet while I said, "I do." I don't know how long I stood there. It might have been 5 minutes. It might have been an eternity. Eventually, the sound ceased, replaced by the murmurs of dressing. I should have run. I should have gone back to my room and locked the door. But a cold, hard rage was beginning to crystallize in my chest, replacing the shock. The door handle turned. I didn't hide. I stood squarely in the center of the hallway, barefoot, wearing my silk bridal robe. The door opened. Marcus stepped out, his shirt unbuttoned, his hair messy. Sophie was right behind him, wrapping a robe around herself, her face flushed. They were laughing softly about something, until they looked up. Their faces went pale when they saw me standing there. And in that moment every lie came crashing down. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had ever experienced. It was a vacuum sucking the air out of the corridor. Marcus was the first to react. He took a half-step back, almost instinctively, as if he expected me to strike him. "It's not. I can explain," he stammered. the cliché falling from his lips clumsy and pathetic. He looked disheveled, small. The grandeur of the groom was gone, replaced by the cheapness of a cheater. You can explain? My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, calm, deadly, devoid of tears. You can explain why you're coming out of my best friend's room at 3 a.m. on our wedding night? Sophie let out a sob, covering her mouth with her hand. Oh God, please. We didn't mean to hurt you. Didn't mean to hurt me? I laughed, a sharp, jagged sound. You stood beside me at the altar today, Sophie. You fixed my veil. I looked at Marcus. And you told me you were too tired. You were too exhausted for your wife, but not for her. Marcus dropped the pretense. His shoulders slumped. It just happened. We've been fighting it for months. I thought if I married you, it would go away. I thought I could do the right thing. The right thing, I repeated, tasting the bitterness of the words. You used me as a shield against your own lack of character. Sophie was crying openly now, whispering apologies that meant nothing. I love him, she choked out. I'm so sorry, but I love him. That was the dagger. Not just the sex, but the emotion. They had built a parallel world behind my back. A romance where I was the obstacle. I looked at them, two people who claimed to love me, now united in their destruction of me. I felt the last tether of my old life snap. I'm done, I said. It wasn't a scream. It was a simple statement of fact. Don't speak to me. Don't follow me. I turned and walked back to the bridal suite. I didn't cry. I packed my bag with mechanical precision. I took off the wedding ring and left it on the nightstand next to the cold, untouched champagne. I put on jeans and a sweater, grabbed my keys and walked out of the suite. The sun was just beginning to bleach the sky gray. I walked out the back doors of the manor, needing air before I got into my car. The grass was wet with dew soaking my sneakers. The estate was silent, peaceful, completely at odds with the hurricane inside me. But I wasn't going to disappear quietly. They needed to face what they'd done. I sat in my car for an hour, watching the sun rise over the lake. The beauty of it felt mocking. But as the light grew stronger, so did my resolve. Running away would look like defeat. It would look like I was the one with something to hide. I wasn't going to let them control the narrative. I wasn't going to let them spin this into a mutual separation. I drove the car around to the front entrance just as the estate was waking up. Guests who had stayed overnight were gathering in the main dining hall for the farewell brunch. The smell of coffee and bacon wafted out, the scent of normalcy. I walked in. The chatter died down slowly as people noticed me. I wasn't wearing my morning after bridal outfit. I was in travel clothes, my eyes red-rimmed but dry, my expression stony. My parents were at a corner table. They stood up immediately, sensing something was wrong. Honey? My mom asked, her voice trembling. I walked to the center of the room. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. I need everyone's attention, I said. The room went silent. I looked around at the faces of my family, Marcus's family, our friends. There won't be a brunch for us today, I announced clearly. Marcus and Sophie won't be joining us. You can find them upstairs together, where they've been all night. Gasps rippled through the room. My mother-in-law dropped her coffee cup. It shattered, the china exploding against the hardwood floor. The marriage is over, I continued, my voice steady. I will be filing for an annulment immediately. Thank you all for coming. And I am sorry that your time and love were wasted on a lie. My father moved first, rushing to my side. His face a mask of fury and protection. He wrapped an arm around me, turning to face the room as if daring anyone to challenge me. Marcus's mother was sobbing now, her head in her hands. The shame in the room was palpable, but it wasn't mine to carry anymore. I had transferred it back to its rightful owners. I turned and walked out of the hall, my father guiding me. I didn't look back at the stairs to see if they had come down. I didn't care. I got into my father's car, leaving my own behind, and we drove away from the lake, from the estate, from the life I thought I was going to live. As I walked away from that house, I had no idea that karma was already preparing their punishment. I didn't wait. The annulment was filed within 48 hours. I blocked their numbers, their emails, their social media. I excised them from my life like a gangrenous limb. It hurt. God, it hurt physically to mourn the death of my friendship and my romance simultaneously. But I channeled that pain into survival. I threw myself into my work. I had been planning to open a boutique clothing store for years, a dream I had put on the back burner to help Marcus with his career. Now I had nothing but time and a fierce need to succeed on my own terms. I used my savings, took out a small loan, and opened Reverie in the city. While I was building, their world was crumbling. News travels fast in small circles. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Marcus and Sophie had moved in together almost immediately. They tried to play the role of star-crossed lovers who had finally found their way to each other. But the foundation was rotten. Within 6 months, the cracks were showing. They were pariahs in our social group. No one wanted to invite the couple that had destroyed a wedding to their dinner parties. Isolated and guilt-ridden, they turned on each other. Neighbors reported constant fighting. The police were called once for a noise complaint. It turns out, a relationship born in deceit rarely survives the light of day. Less than a year later, Marcus cheated on Sophie. It was almost poetic. He met a younger woman at a bar, told her a sob story about his crazy ex-wife and suffocating girlfriend, and history repeated itself. Sophie was left alone in the apartment they shared, devastatingly single, with no best friend to call for comfort. She had destroyed her support system for a man who viewed loyalty as a suggestion. Meanwhile, Reverie was flourishing. I opened a second location, then a third. I was traveling to Paris and Milan for fashion weeks. I was busy, successful, and for the first time in my life, completely independent. I learned to enjoy my own company, to dine alone without feeling lonely, to sleep in the middle of the bed. 3 years later, just when I'd completely healed, fate had one more surprise in store. I met Ethan at a textile conference in Chicago. He was the keynote speaker, a man who ran a sustainable fabric company. I approached him to ask a question about ethical sourcing, and we ended up talking for 3 hours in the hotel lobby. There were no sparks, no fireworks, no dizzying rush of adrenaline. Instead, there was a calm, steady warmth. Felt like coming home. Ethan was everything Marcus wasn't. He was transparent. He was patient. When I told him my story, months into our dating, he didn't pity me. He just held my hand and said, "I'm sorry you went through that, but I'm glad it led you here." We built a relationship brick by brick, based on trust and mutual respect. I learned that love didn't have to be a roller coaster of highs and lows. It could be a steady river. I was happy, truly deeply happy. One afternoon, I was at my flagship store when the bell chimed. I looked up from the counter and felt a jolt of recognition. It was Marcus. He looked terrible. Older, thinner, his eyes dull. He walked up to the counter, wringing his hands. "Hi," he said, his voice raspy. "Get out," I said calmly. I didn't feel fear. I didn't even feel anger. I just felt annoyance. "Please just give me 5 minutes," he begged. I made a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life. Sophie was. She wasn't you. I miss you. I miss us. I looked at him, this man who had once been my world, and realized he was a stranger. A sad, selfish stranger. There is no us, Marcus. There hasn't been since the moment you walked into her room. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. "I can change," he pressed, leaning over the counter. "I can be the man you wanted." I smiled, but it was ice cold. "I don't need you to be anything. I have a partner who loves me. I have a business that I built. I have a life that has no space for you." I pointed to the door. "Leave. Or I call security." He stared at me for a long moment, searching for a crack in my armor, but he found none. Defeated, he turned and walked out into the rain. And in that moment, I realized that the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's becoming so genuinely happy that they become irrelevant. I'm writing this from the terrace of the home I share with Ethan. The sun is setting, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold, mirroring the autumn leaves of that fateful day years ago. But this time there is no dread in my stomach. Ethan is inside making tea, humming a tune. We are getting married next month. A small, private ceremony on a cliffside. No bridesmaids, no grand reception, just us and the truth. Looking back, I realized that the wedding day I thought was my tragedy was actually my salvation. If Marcus hadn't shown me who he was that night, I might have spent a lifetime with a man who didn't respect me. I might never have found the strength to build my own empire. I might never have met Ethan. The betrayal broke me, yes. It shattered me into a million sharp pieces. But in reassembling those pieces, I built a different woman. A woman who knows her worth. A woman who knows that loyalty is a minimum requirement, not a bonus. A woman who is not afraid to walk away when respect is no longer being served. To anyone reading this who feels like their world has ended because of someone else's cruelty, hold on. The pain is temporary. It burns, it sears, but it purifies. You will rise from the ash. You will find that you are stronger than you ever imagined. Do not let their failure to love you convince you that you are unlovable. Ethan steps out onto the terrace, placing a steaming mug in front of me. He kisses the top of my head. "Ready for dinner?" he asks. "Ready," I say, smiling up at him. And I am. Ready for dinner. Ready for marriage. Ready for life. True love doesn't come to save you. It comes when you've already saved yourself.